Okay, so this is being made for folks who missed class today, particularly Elise at your request. And there's a couple others as well. And what I'm going to do is go over the presentation part of what I talked about today in class. I'm not actually going to show the speeches within this video because there's a bunch of self-intro speeches included in this discussion because I always provide examples as we go from speech to speech. But you can open the presentation that you're looking at through the link in Moodle and watch the speeches themselves. And I'm got a lot of grading and other stuff I need to do. So I'm going to talk about what I talked about in class. And when we get to where there's a speech or a video, I'm going to skip it because you can either watch it later or you can pause this and then open up the presentation and watch it there in the right place in the presentation, and you've already got it. And that saves me some time for grading and some other stuff. So the main topic that we talked about today is you've got a self-intro speech coming up in a week. And so you will see examples of student-driven self-intro speeches. All of the speech recordings that you see in this presentation are either students from previous classes of mine who gave me permission to use them and they know I'm using them in class, or some of them came from YouTube where students posted their own speeches for public use. But they all fit the format that we're talking about for what you're going to do next Wednesday. I'm also going to talk about, back when we talked outlining, we talked like 30,000 high level view of what needed to be in a speech and what needs to be in the outlines. Today, I'm going to go down to about a 10,000 foot view. So we're going to dig a little deeper into components that you need in each section. And then on Friday, we'll dig even closer down into particularly introductions and conclusions, because for some reason, students always neglect to do introductions and conclusions. They don't put enough into them or they just skip them entirely. So we'll look at that. So, going forward, basically speeches have three parts, just like an essay has or a paper has. This won't be a big surprise. The components, you've got the introduction, you've got the body, and you've got the conclusion. The slight difference here is in a speech, you want to dedicate a certain amount of time typically to the introduction and a certain amount of time to the conclusion. Now, somebody asked in class today, does it have to be exactly the time percentage? No, it doesn't. But as a general rule, an introduction is about 15% of the total time of the speech. And so to put that in realistic terms, if you have a 5-minute speech and you have at least two coming up, your informative and your persuasive speeches will both include 5 minutes in their ranges. That means your introduction should be about 45 seconds long. And that's to kind of give you a framework. A lot of the object speeches that we saw last week in class were only about 45 to 50 seconds long. So the whole speech was about what a 5-minute speech introduction would be. And we'll get a little bit further in, we'll see why, because there's things you need to do in your introduction. Then, of course, you have the body of your speech, and that's roughly about 75% of the total time that your speech goes. And then you have the conclusion, and that should be about 10% of your time. So in a 5-minute speech, it's about a 30-second conclusion. And again, there's elements that you want to make sure you do in each one of these sections of the speech, which is why that time part's so there. And we'll dig a little bit into those today. When you're getting ready to build your speech, and you're going to hear me, I've said a lot of this stuff before, I'm going to say it today, you're going to hear me say it down the road. Repetition for a public speaker is key. It's a tool, it's a help. You want to repeat your key things multiple times in a speech because that makes it hit home. You'll hear me say this a ton of times. You want to tell them what you're going to tell them, then you want to tell them, and then you want to tell them what you just told them, because there's this magic repetition of three. And when we hear things 3 or more times, it typically stays in our head, which is, of course, what you're after when you're taking the time to give a speech. So prepping your speeches, and this is true for all of them. The first thing is you want to make sure you fit your time limit. If it's got a minimum time, you want to hit it. If it's got a maximum time, you want to try not to go over it. Now, as we progress into the semester, you will see the allowances for over especially adjust, because I've had some speeches that they went over, but there was really nothing else that I could see that they could take out of their speech. They couldn't see anything to take out of their speech. It was all relevant to what they wanted to say. You just want to avoid getting into those. I think I told the class about that one speech that a person did on the K-pop band, and it was 12 something minutes long, and we learned about their favorite colors and favorite foods and stuff that didn't matter. If it's something really important, you can go over, but typically in a work situation, they're going to say you need to give a 5-minute speech or a 5-minute project update. And they're going to stick to that 5 minutes and they're going to yank you off. Or you watch TED, all those TED Talks, because you've seen tons of TED Talks. I know you have, and you're going to see some in here. The speakers always have somewhere on the stage a clock running, and that clock is to remind them how much time they have left, because TED will pull you. I've never seen anybody go over. But I do know that if you start to go over, TED will pull you, whether you're done or not, because they've got a schedule they've got to meet. And that's usually the case. So fit your speech to your time limit, practice it over and over and over, and get it within the range. Then you also want to use creativity. You are talking about a subject. You want to make it interesting and memorable for your audience. Find creative ways to do it. And you're going to see today some creative ways to do it. That last speech that you watch, it's called MIC, Made in China. That guy used incredible creativity it will probably stick in your mind for a good while after you see that speech. That's what creativity is for. And it's kind of fun because you get to show your personality and show your creative skills. And sometimes you tie some unrelated thing to what you're wanting to talk about and bring them together, and people go, wow, that was brilliant. So find creative ways to present whatever your topic is. Also, use colorful descriptive language when you're describing something. Like, say, for example, I think the example I used in class was, let's say over winter break, you got to go to Italy and it was fantastic. And you want to talk about your trip to Italy. Don't just say, well, I went here and then I went here and I went here. Describe it in a way that the person listening to it can almost see it in their minds. They can almost visualize they're there. The more colorful and descriptive we can make it, the more you get that mental image in your brain. And the more you can do the mental image thing in somebody's brain, the more likely they are to remember it. So use colorful descriptive language, and also use stories. We love stories. As little kids, we wanted our parents to tell us stories. We learn from stories. Even as adults, we don't call it stories, but TV shows, movies, even games, most of the really good computer games are driven around some sort of a storyline or some sort of a story. We love stories. And one of the things, and we'll talk about this more on Friday, one of the things that people will do in a speech is they'll start with a story, and somehow it's tied to their real topic, and they'll get partially into the story, and then they'll slide into the body of the speech, the main point of what they want to talk about. And then as they go into their conclusion, they'll slide back into that story and finish the story. People love that. And there's lots of examples, and you'll see a ton as we go forward. So think of ways to incorporate stories. Don't just say, well, today I want to talk to you about golf. Instead, talk about a story where you were playing golf and maybe what motivated you to like golf, or whatever your topic is. Enlighten the audience on something that's cool about this that you encountered or something. Make it more personal by adding a story and description into it. So this is your first speech. We're not going to watch it. This is from a student of mine last summer, and you'll need to turn the volume up on this one. The sound in the classroom was terrible. The sound in my office works great. So I'm not sure. It kind of depends on what you're listening to it on. It's a self-intro speech, and at this point, he's at the same point you guys are. So he's had this lecture. The speech for self-intro comes up within the week after this. And he had this idea of the man in the mirror, and he talks about it's based off of Michael Jackson's song Man in the Mirror. But his approach is extremely creative. He gave the speech, and when he got done, I said, I am not going to grade it right now, but I would like to be able to use this speech in class because it's an excellent approach and it's unique. And he said, yeah, that's fine. So you'll want to watch this one. It's a very good speech. So when you're practicing, you want to talk it, do it out loud, hear yourself speak, practice inflection, pitch, rate, all of we haven't got to it, I know, but practice saying it so that when you say it, if you're excited, your voice sounds excited. If you're very somber and serious, your voice sounds somber and serious. You want the sound of the speech to match the actual words of the speech, and a lot of times the way we say the words controls what the actual message is. So like my wife comes home and I say, how are you? And if she says, oh, I'm fine, then you kind of know she's fine. But if she says, I'm fine, you know darn well she's not fine. Practice it so that when you say it, it matches your intent. And then also walk around. Practice giving your speech standing up. If you're going to use the podium, practice in front of the podium, but work in your gestures that you're going to use. If you're not going to use the podium, and a lot of speakers don't, they're going to move around as they talk, work that in there so that it feels more natural to you, so that maybe you're at main point one, and then you transition over to main point two, and at the same time you move across the floor. And then you stop and you talk about main point two, and then you're in a transition and you move, physically moving while you're mentally moving in the speech, repetition again. And people go, oh, this is going to be a change. This is going to be important. And also imagine yourself doing well. You've been in front of the classroom once. You see the faces staring at you. We're going to do most of the speeches in that room. Envision yourself walking in there, giving the speech, how it's going to look, how they're going to react. They're going to laugh at your funny stuff, and they're going to be serious about your serious stuff, and they applaud at the end. Visualize that because it'll motivate you to do really well. When you're presenting the speech, plant your feet. I had a lot of people, and it depends on each speaker's a little bit different, but a lot of people, when they get up in front of class, especially on that first speech, they're nervous and they shift back and forth on their feet. They'll actually physically pick their feet up, or maybe they feel really awkward. And I had a couple that cross their feet or cross their legs while they're talking, and put one foot in front of the other. You want to avoid that kind of stuff. You want to project confidence. And so plant your feet and get a firm foundation underneath you and stand up proud and appear confident, because speakers want you to be confident. And when you appear confident, it improves your credibility. If you get up there and you're all, I'm really timid and scared, and I'm not sure I want to give this, they pick up on that, and it lowers your credibility. And credibility is king in a public speaking environment. So plant your feet, don't lock your knees. And I was surprised nobody in class knew this today, but when you lock your knees, you have a very high probability of passing out. I don't understand the science and the body behind it, but I know that it happens. And I know, like in the military, because they stand at attention a lot, and they do a lot of stuff where they're marching and all. They're all told, don't lock your knees when you're standing at attention. My nephew is in the Marine Corps, and when he went through boot camp, that was one of the very first things he told him. And he said it was funny because a whole lot of people didn't listen, and they'd be standing there at attention and they'd lock their knees thinking that it would make them more rigid and less likely to fall over. And he said almost every one of them passed out. And even some of them, when they were graduating and they're on the parade grounds and they're at attention in front of all these generals and stuff, a few of them went and locked their knees in those situations and passed out in their own graduation. So, and I've had one student do it as well. So don't lock your knees. Keep yourself a little bit flexed and loose. It keeps the body a little bit relaxed as well when you don't lock your knees. So don't lock your knees. Take a look around the room, and you'll see this a lot, especially with some of the TED Talks, and you're going to see speech competition people do this. They will look around the room before they ever begin, and they try to make eye contact with everybody in the room, and they smile. And they smile because we want people to like us. We want to appear friendly. And when people do think that we're friendly, and they do tend to like us on first glance, because we are very judgy and we make decisions on first glance, if they feel positive about you, they're going to be more receptive to your message. So you want to smile when you get up in front. And like I said, you want to try to make eye contact around the room. And while you're presenting, and this is a good thing to practice, look around the room. Some people look down at their notes because they're very shy, they're very introverted, or they'll find one friendly face and they'll focus on that one friendly face and not look at everybody else. Everybody else picks up on that and they feel like you're leaving them out. And the person who you've picked out to be the friendly face kind of gets creeped out because you're talking only to them. And I had a couple of students who, since I've got the iPad up and I'm recording you, they only talk straight into the camera and you forget that everybody else is around you. So practice looking around the room all the way through the speech. You don't have to lock eyes. You don't have to stare anybody down, but at least make everybody feel like you're talking to them. Then also work in gestures. If you're going to say, like, I have 3 things to say, go, I have 3 things to say, or if you're using the European, I have 3 things to tell you today. And they are going to be so important to you. Work those things in. It's important because if you say 3, everybody knows what 3 is, right? But you show it when you say it, it's built-in repetition. They see it and they hear it at the same time. Oh, there's 3 things. It helps you remember, it helps the audience remember what you're talking about, what your 3 critical points were, that kind of thing. And gestures show excitement and enthusiasm. You're getting to pick all of your subjects, I know, except for the self-intro speech. Show enthusiasm for your topic because your gestures will show that. I'm really excited. People that are excited when they're in conversations, they're using their hands a lot. Do that in your speech as well, because that becomes contagious with the audience. If you're enthusiastic and really excited about your topic, when you do that to your audience, they're going to be the same way. So work gestures in. And then always remember to breathe. You might even want to work in some like breathe spots. I've had people actually put it in their speaking outline. Point 1, transition, breathe. Point 2, transition, breathe. It gives you a minute to relax. It gives you a minute to take in a good breath and let it out. The heart rate drops a little bit. The blood pressure drops a little bit. The stress level drops a little bit. It's a very helpful thing, and their ears get a little bit of a break. And so you're not blah, 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 and just hounding them with words. Breath helps you. It also helps the audience. So remember to breathe. And also, we tend to speed up when we're talking. So if you put some breaths in there, it will help you eat up a little bit of time. Tariq brought that up today, and I was like, yep, that's exactly right. I appreciate the honesty because that's true. In the introduction, there's 5 parts. See, I did it again. There's 5 parts that you want to make sure you cover. The first is have some kind of element that gets the audience's attention. And we'll talk a lot more about this on Friday when we look at intros and conclusions. You want to grab your audience and get them to pay attention. When you look out, you see phones and computers and tablets, and we're daydreaming and we're working on other stuff. And I see it all the time in class. Get them to stop what they're doing and pay attention to you. There's all kinds of stories and a good idea to do it, or you'll see other things on the discussion on Friday, but you want to grab your audience. So have some really catchy element. Tell them what you're going to tell them. And I've already said this once, right? Tell them what you're going to tell them. Tell them what you told them. Tell them what you're going to tell them is one of the 5 things that should be in your introduction. Today, I'm going to teach you how to make brownies. And there's 3 critical elements to making brownies. Always let them know, oh, I'm going to learn about this. They feel a little better about knowing in advance without having to try to figure it out through your speech. Then you also, and this is one that gets left out a lot, relate it to your audience. You might really be interested in, I had a guy give a speech one time. I told the class this today. I had a guy give a speech one time. He played hockey. And his process speech was how to properly tape wrap a hockey stick. And in general, and I even asked the class today, I said, how many of you play hockey? No hands go up. How many of you watch hockey? No hands go up. So there's nobody's interested in hockey. Now, this guy loved it. He just breathed hockey. Find a way to relate it to your audience so that they might benefit from knowing this. And his way of doing it was, you might not care about hockey now, but down the road, you'll have kids, and we live in a part of the year cold climate, and hockey is pretty relevant around in the winter for different, there's, winter leagues for hockey, and there's schools that have hockey teams. And you may have a kid that wants to play hockey or that is playing hockey, and kids are notoriously terrible at taping their blades. And they'll come to you with the tape and the stick and want you to show them how to tape it. And if you don't know how, the kid's, going to be a loss and have to go to coach or whatever. But if you know how to do it, even though you've never played hockey, the kid's like, wow, you know how to, it helps build that bond, right? So even though you might not need it now, down the road, you may have a hockey playing kid, and this will really elevate you in their eyes. Now you've found a reason why somebody might want to actually pay attention to how to wrap a hockey stick. And I've had people use all kinds of ideas like that, but find a way to state what the subject is to the audience and relate it to them so they feel like they're gaining something by learning about what you're talking about. And then establish your credibility. How long have you been doing this? Why are you interested in it? What makes you somebody that I should listen to about this topic? And you'll have to establish your own credibility. And what you don't want to do, and I've had a lot of people do this, I think I talked about baseball guy because he talked about baseball every single speech, right? He still had to establish credibility for every little speech that he did in the class, because your approach is to be, none of these people have seen you give a speech before. So you need to tell them why you're credible on your topic. And so if you're a baseball guy, you do the intro speech, you talk about baseball, process speech comes around, you still have to establish credibility again. And if you go to the informative speech and talk about baseball, you got to do it again. So you're going to tell the audience why you should be believed. How do they know that you didn't just look this up last night on the internet and you're spewing it out today, as opposed to, this is something I'm really interested in. I've been interested in a long time because of this reason. And, I've done it with this club, or I went to this school, or whatever it is that makes you credible, tell them. And then preview the main points. I'm going to tell you how to make brownies, and it's these 3 easy steps. So again, roughly go through either your central idea or your main points, or both. Longer speeches, more complex speeches, you're going to get into main ideas, but preview what they're going to get. And that all belongs in your introduction. When there's some examples of introductions, I would really only watch like the first 3. I think we only showed the first 3 in class today. And you'll get why they work. The first one has this, he's setting it up as though he's going to tell you some really spicy, juicy piece of gossip, because we all like that kind of reality-ish stuff, right? And then he turns it into a joke, and he gets the audience to laugh. So he actually uses the 2 things to draw them in. He's going to tell them a secret, and then the secret actually turns out to be a joke that's really funny. And okay, and then the people kind of like him. And we'll talk about all this stuff again on Friday. This is another self-intro speech. This is from an online class. Again, she is following the patterns that we're talking about. This is not an A speech. It's probably a B at best. And what we did is we watched the speech, then we talked about what they thought was good about it and what they thought was bad about it, and you can do the same thing. Then in the body of the speech, this is a little bit easier, and it's also the most open because you're determining it based on whatever it is you're going to talk about that day. But organize it in an effective way so that it flows smoothly, and that step 1 builds into step 2, and step 3 builds out of step 2, so that it builds upon each other, and it makes sense because you don't have a lot of time to talk. So use really good, effective organization. Try to keep it to no more to 2 to 3 points. 4, maybe when you get into an 8-minute speech, you might need to have 4 main points. You don't want to have more than that. If you've got 10 steps to something, that's too many steps. Nobody's going to remember 10 steps. They'll remember 2 or 3. They won't remember 10. So you want to find a way to squeeze it down or present it differently, or maybe not even use that topic if you have too much information. But 2 to 3 points of the body of the speech. And then you want to use transitions. So we've talked about point number 1, and now I want to bring you over to point number 2 and show you why that's important and how it's related. Well, that's a transition statement. You don't just go, that was number 1, here's number 2. You want to have something that moves like a story so that it flows. In conversations, you flow things from one subject to another. You're going to flow in the body of the speech as well. And those are called transitions. And you'll see them listed in that preparation outline sample that is at the end of the chapter. The conclusion is the other area where people tend to mess up. You want to signal your conclusion. You want the audience to know the end is coming. It's almost over. And so in conclusion, or we're about to wrap things up, or in summary, or some kind of a little signal that, hey, the speech is coming to a close. And then you want to restate your central idea. Again, tell them what you're going to tell them in the intro, tell them in the body, tell them what you just told them in the conclusion. You're getting that repetition of 3 in there. So restate the central idea, review the main points. If you have a couple of good main points, especially if they're critical to understanding, just say them again. And the speech you watched, that Ella Puente speech where she talks about her roles, her goals, and beliefs, she did that in the conclusion. She talked about, when you think of me, think of my goals, and think of my roles, and think of my beliefs. And she restated all that stuff. That's kind of what we're talking about in your conclusion. And then have some kind of a strong ending. I think she used a quote. Yeah, she did use a quote at the end of that speech. Different things work. One real common thing is to start with a story, slide out of the story and not finish it in the intro, go into the body of your speech, go into the conclusion. Oh, by the way, I didn't finish that story. So this is how that ends. And it can be related to what you're talking about, which is usually a good thing to do. But you could even use a story that wasn't related. Hopefully you find some little thread that's relatable. But have something that really makes it memorable, because this is your last time to make an impression on your audience. So use that strong ending to make that impression. And you'll see examples of good strong endings on Friday. This is another self-intro speech from the online class. She calls this Hickory Dickory Dock. I had some people not get that, the theme, as they watched it in class today, but everything is centered around her and time. And let's just assume you go and watch it now and you come back. She talks about time in terms of past, present, and future, which is time, right? It's all very time-based. And she has her planner out at one point. She talks about her planning. And so that's her sort of way of going into my current situation, into my future situation. And she also, I think, used Hickory Dickory Dock because it rhymes, and we tend to remember rhymes really well. That was a good thing. In the Ella Puente speech about her roles, goals, and beliefs, she said roles, beliefs, and goals. And I always pointed out that it would be better if she went roles, goals, and beliefs because it rhymes at the first part and people remember it. Little language tricks like that work wonders. But this is another self-intro speech that works pretty darn well. And there's 6 things that really good speakers always do. They always earn the gift of the audience's time and attention. If you're getting up to speak in front of people, and I know in class you don't have a choice, you have to be there to get a grade, earn that time. Make it worth their while. Theoretically, you're bringing a gift to them. They're going to learn why your topic is relevant, what they're going to gain from it. Earn that. They're giving you some precious commodity they can't get back, which is time. Earn it. Really put a lot into the speech if you can. Always find an idea that you're passionate about, but that you're also credible about. I can't stress that enough. You can be passionate about it, and some people aren't credible yet about something they're passionate about. Sometimes you can still work that into a speech, but there's other stuff that you're passionate about that you are very credible on, and bring that stuff in. Don't just pick a subject at random because you needed to find something to speak and you're not really interested in it. That shows to the audience. Also, know why it matters to you and explain why it matters to them. Knowing how to do this could save a life someday, or knowing how to do this will help you to be able to, like in a process speech, to make a type of food. You'll be able to make this food and your friends will be impressed and they'll love the food and they'll all want the recipe, and you'll be the hero of the day. And whatever it is, find why you like it and get them to feel the same thing. Get them to understand it should matter to them for the same kind of reasons. Also, rehearse the experience you will have. You can't over rehearse a speech. Now, we did talk briefly today about you could turn it into a script and lose some of your enthusiasm in the speech. Some people felt that the Ella Puente speech, the lady that was in the Army, was a little too monotonish and over rehearsed. And some people felt the Hickory Dickory Dock one was a little over rehearsed as well. That comes into more inflection and tone and pitch and how you work your vocal licks. But practice. Practice. Don't think, oh, well, I know this topic. I could just go in and wing it, because that will stand out. And I will probably call you out on it, because I'll be able to look at you and know, yeah, you're winging this right now. You're just totally making it up. Also, craft your speech as a conversation. You're not speaking at them, you're speaking with your audience. It's not a play, it's not a movie, it's not a scripted performance. It should be a conversation. I mentioned this today in class, and every one of my classes is like this. I know in my head an outline of what I want to cover for the day, but what I'm going to say between each of those points, I never know for sure. And I have several times, I did it today. I talked about one topic and then I went to another topic and I went off on a tangent a little bit. And it was something I had never brought up in a previous class before, but it felt right at the time. That's a conversational thing. We do that in conversations a lot. We'll suddenly think of something and throw that into the conversation. That's kind of what I mean. You want to sound like it's relaxed, it's conversational. It's not, I am reading to you from a script, blah, 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 blah. You want to avoid that kind of thing because it feels more engaging and it feels more likable if it's conversation like. So try to work that into your speech delivery. And then always harness the power of movement, work in gestures, work in movement. If you want to move, if you want to stand behind the podium, that's fine too. But work in hand gestures, make sure your facial expressions, film yourself a couple of times and make sure your facial expression supports what you're saying, because a lot of times I'm absolutely ecstatically crazy about guitars. And you look at my face and I could care less in my facial expressions, but I'm telling you I'm ecstatic. And you're going to believe my facial expressions. He doesn't care at all. I can tell from looking at his face. Practice those things. Get those gestures in there. Show that enthusiasm. Show that excitement and all of that. This is the last speech that goes with this particular section. This is the MIC Made in China speech. This was done at another college in the classroom, and the teacher makes a mistake. And in that class, they had to turn their outlines in before they started their speech. And apparently he had done that, and she got lost and didn't realize she had the outline. So she stops him after he starts and he has to restart. So that's a little bit what happens in the beginning. But the speech itself is brilliant. He takes this common idea and applies it to himself, and it's memorable. It's super memorable. So those are some self-intro speeches. Now, one other thing, and I didn't tell the class this on Friday. Today, I'm going to bring it up on Friday because I forgot. I have loaded into Moodle. I haven't released it yet, but I will release it here. I'll probably wait till Friday now because they won't know what hit them if I just release it. It's a speech. I call it a template, but you could use it as a checklist. So you want to make sure you have your introduction, and in your introduction, you've got the attention getter. You state the purpose, you establish your credibility, relate the topic to the audience, and preview your central idea and/or your main points. Make sure that's all there. Then in the main body, your main points are clear and flow well. They're logical. You can observe clear logic in the speech. And you've got transitions. I forgot to put that one in there. And then in conclusions, you use a clear signpost. So in summary, to conclude, to close, whatever you use. And then review the central idea again and your main points and have a memorable ending. Now, I have all of this on a sheet, and what you could do, and I did this for my public speaking classes last semester. I had 2 of them, and they all wanted this sheet. I actually had to bring them in paper copies. And what they did, and this was my suggestion, this is what I did when I was in school. I had a sheet like this, and I would write out my speech, and I'd practice it, and then I would, okay, yep, I got that one. Oh, yep, I have that. And I would literally go down each one of these and make sure I have them in there, because when you go look at the speech rubrics, they're in there in the speech rubric. So I'm grading to it, so you might as well make sure that it's in there when you're creating your speech. And so that's pretty much all of what I presented in a much faster format because we didn't watch the speeches, and I kind of talked a little fast, I think. But that's the basics of putting together a speech and all of the components that you need. And then, like I said, on Friday, we'll dig into introduction specifically and things that you can do to make your introduction more interesting. The same with the conclusions. And there's some really good examples of speeches in there, and you'll see that in either the presentation on Friday if you're in class, or you'll see it in the video when I get that to you. All right. So that's it for this discussion. Hope it helps. And hopefully I'll see you in class. Talk to you later.